All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Sasha Klare-Ayvazian. This is another installment of Music, Movies, and Hoops Interviews. As always, if you enjoy the original content we're putting out, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm so excited today of our wonderful person, incredible musician, former band leader for T-Bird and the Breaks, current chief engineer at Bud's Recording Services, also the grand poobah of Bud's, Mr. Sam Patlove. How are you doing tonight, man?
I'm great, Sasha. Thanks for having me.
Man, thank you for being here. We're both from Western Mass. It's how we got to know each other. But Sam, I want you to know I think of you as an Austin OG.
What year did you come here?
I've been here 6 years. I got here in 2014.
Right, so I only have about 7 years on you,
So, man, I kind of just wanted to start big picture, Sam. I just wanted to dive right in with you. What do you love most about the Austin scene?
It's a good question. It's especially on my mind because I just went to this demonstration today at City Hall regarding Austin venues. So, yeah, man, the thing that struck me when I first got here in 2007 was that people really appreciated live music. And I'd been living in Northampton, Massachusetts, playing in a band, and we were, getting our gigs in Northampton at the 11s. For those of you who know Northampton, Iron Horse was like a big deal if you got that. Trying to play New York City, trying to play Boston. It was different. And when I came here, I got to be a part of a really cool community at this club called Momo's, which you unfortunately missed.
I did miss.
And it was just like, it was like the first show I went to, which was Warren Hood and the Hoodlums. And I remember first of all, I was like amazed at the level of musicianship I was seeing, which is of course everywhere, but I was just like, oh my God, this is just some Sunday night thing. It's packed. They're really good. And they're playing a style of music I wasn't aware that was even played, sort of like a Western swing kind of thing.
You're not going to hear that in Western Mass.
You're not. Yeah, I was struck by that. And then the more I looked around and lived out my life here, it was like people really appreciate it. They like to have their leisure time. They like to go sit on a patio, drink a margarita, and watch music. And it's like, wow, this is a cool thing, and this is unique.
Man, everyone talks about Momo's being the spot, really the center of the scene. I missed it. Tell us a little about what made it what it was.
Well, the owner, Paul Avesi, certainly got to be at the top of that list, I guess. Paul is a great guy, and he would be there every night. He would just hop on the light board back by the soundboard and, hang out after shows, maybe pull out some beers after hours, doors locked. Obviously was booking great bands. Beyond that, there's probably just some variables that we can't pin down, like a time, a place.
Yes.
Certain musicians started playing there. It just was a nice setup. It had this outdoor area and it had these garage doors, so you could be outside smoking, which I did a ton of back then, and still be like connected to the music and the stage.
Was it like nice, or was it divey and endearing?
It was kind of just the right amount of both.
I think, Sam, part of why I think of you as an Austin OG, even though you've only lived here since 2007, is because you seem very Austin. It seems like you really found a nice blend of your personality in the place you live. When I think about what's best with Austin, it's in the middle of the country, and it really is that nice balance between the coasts. I think it's not as uptight and intense as the East Coast, particularly the Northeast, and it's not quite as laid back as the West Coast. People are chill here and positive, and there's a flexibility, but people also get things done in Austin. And that seems like you. You're relaxed. You want to have a good time. You're down to have a beer. You're down to have good vibes. But you also want to make records. And then in terms of musically, I think what makes Austin is you can kind of do whatever genre you want to do. But whatever you do, there's a certain country twang. There's a certain bluesy vibe. There's a certain swampiness. There's a certain attitude that kind of seeps into the music, kind of regardless of genre. And I think that you gravitate towards that, and it kind of comes out of you organically. Would you agree with this assessment?
Yeah, man, and kind words, I feel like it's a compliment to that you characterize me as a OG Austinite or whatever. And I do feel a connection here. Yeah, I guess, in regarding what you're saying about that sort of vibe, I think it's a good assessment of something that's imbued in a lot of Austin music. I feel like there's all these different musical threads that was in the South in the 60s and 70s.
Yep.
Of sort of this like country funk.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm sort of zooming in on a thing right now, but it's just sort of as an example. But I do think that if you had to find a place where that thread has remained alive, it's probably here,
Who are the pioneers of that?
One of the prime examples would be Tony Joe White. He's got a song called Poke Salad Annie, and it's just super funky, but it's just like this hillbilly sort of vibe underneath it, the accent.
Yes.
But there was so much crossover too, like Memphis is sort of
not that far away.
Not that far away, but I was going to get into the sort of the racial crossover. Like, there's this swampy thing that melded out of the two races, and Memphis was a prime example of that. Stax, the main Stax band was biracial from the beginning, and Muscle Shoals, Alabama, like a lot of those sounds were coming out of those places. I guess to tie it back together, I feel like that some degree lives in Austin.
It's, what's making me think, Sam, it's like, they talk about how classical music and then blues and African-American spiritual music created jazz.
Yeah.
It's almost like country and funk created Austin.
Yeah. That's pretty good. But you can't discount the blues, because Clifford Antone, blues was big. Sometimes I think it's the one that got the most notice in Austin, so it almost gets more attention than
Stevie Ray. Yeah,
Stevie Ray and Antones in general, and Clifford Antone. Clifford just loved blues, so he was bringing guys who were still alive and touring, at the time. All the Kings and Buddy Guy and all these people. So that must have been awesome back in the day when it was on 6th Street, and, it was the 80s. The cocaine was great. Things were a little more small towny.
Not the 6th Street we know now.
Not at all.
I want to go back to 2007.
Yeah.
The city's obviously transformed so much. What was the scene like at that point?
Yeah, so 2007, which is really not that long ago, it was
right.
The Frost Tower was the tallest. I think the Austonian then became like the next big building, and they just sort of were popping up, and there was just this crane thing all the time, which sort of still is. Yeah, so West 6th Street was sort of like where Momo's was, and that was sort of cool. Dirty 6th Street was already sort of what it is now. East of the highway was a completely different story. As most people know, over the last maybe 50 years, black neighborhood, and 7th and south to the river was more Mexican-American. So that was still what those neighborhoods mostly were. It was like the poor artists were moving in. There were no venues at all. There was sort of one place called the Long Branch Inn. Rest in peace. Loved that place.
R.I.P. Shouts.
On East 11th. And that was an old bar. That little neighborhood was, I don't know if you know the history of the black community in Austin, but originally they lived on the west side of town, what's now Clarksdale, now a wealthy neighborhood, on the details. But my understanding was that they decided they wanted to move this population to the east side, which was mostly probably farmland at that point. And they did it in sort of a shitty way, like we can imagine things were done in the past. I think they just like shut off city. Yeah, still are. They just shut off city gas or something. Anyways, so that's when the east side became what it was until somewhat recently. So that little area, East 11th, was like a little center. There was the Victory Grill is across the street, which is historic spot on the Chitlin Circuit. Haven't been in there in years, but a great room that you can feel the history in. But yeah, the Long Branch was like the only little bar, and they sort of had a stage, but it wasn't even really a music joint. It was just like a Pabst drinking joint for hipsters, And then there was the Scoot Inn, which was
still here.
Yep. That was one of the first, and that was before, both of those were there before I got there, but not that long, is my understanding. I mean, there was bars all along East 6, which, now we have Hotel Vegas and all the bars. Those were all Tejano bars. Right over there by the highway.
Was Whitehorse early?
No, Whitehorse is relatively later.
Okay.
That was a place called La Trampa for years, and it was sort of like real seedy, like
okay.
kind of place you go in and it's like just dudes, you know?
Oh,
and if
yeah.
there's a chick, like she's working, you know?
Yeah, right. Working.
Yeah. As an aside, nothing's worse than when you're on the road in a band because you're playing in bars and you have to show up during the day to load in.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And first of all, the sunlight might be shining in so that you see how like truly filthy a bar is. Like there's dust everywhere. And then that smell is not a good smell in the day. When you're possibly hungover.
There's a lot of bars you don't want to be at when the sun's up. When and how did you form T-Bird?
Tim Crane, T-Bird himself, the man, the myth, the legend. We had a band together in Massachusetts. He had moved here. We broke up the band. I guess I don't remember exactly how that went down, but
A lot of drama. Heartbreak.
No, not at all.
I'm kidding.
But he had decided to take a trip around the country and had visited Austin and was like sold on it, you know?
Yeah.
So he moved, you know, for like 6 months he was here and he was sort of like calling me and I was like, just like not taking his calls, just like on a flip phone, mind you. Just like,
Of course.
like I knew what he wanted. Like, come on down, let's make this band. Like we'd already sort of been talking about having like a big soul band with horns and chicks. Like we were listening to a lot of that kind of music, discovering that stuff. So
Who are you listening to?
I mean, at that time, like,
Yeah.
and still, Wilson Pickett, James Brown, all the Aretha Franklin, Meters. So eventually, I wasn't happy in Massachusetts, like not being in a band at that point in my life. Like I would go out to Bishop's Lounge and like have a shitty time because I was like, I'd see great music and I was like, I'm not doing it, you know?
I do.
And something felt like I was like, I needed it. So it's a pretty clear draw. And I just packed up the car and drove to Austin. I just crashed in the house that he had a room in with a Western Mass friend. So I just slept on a floor in like the music room. But we were rehearsing in that little room that was my bedroom. It was literally like smaller than this room I'm in right now.
I can picture like the 2 a.m. jam. You're like, guys, can we pick this up tomorrow?
Wasn't like that quite, but it was like, there's my, camping pad and sleeping bag, while we're rehearsing, sort of shoved into the corner.
So basically on day one, you're already kind of involved in this whole budding enterprise.
Yeah, we hit the ground running. And, Tim's a really good person at driving a team. Neither of us are, particularly like great musicians. We were never in our old band or anything like the kind of people that just like could sit down and like read charts and like have all the tunes. Like we needed rehearsing. We basically rehearsed all summer. Like I got there in June. We didn't have our first gig till October. But yeah, it was like Johnny, the guitar player that was through Craigslist that Tim had found, was working the door at Momo's, Mm-hmm. Like it was just this, he was like, yeah, I could get us a gig there. It was like this, it was like, cool. Like I had no idea what that was and it seemed good.
So for people who don't know, Sam, T-Bird, you kind of did all the things. Played ACL, toured, KUTX, Song of the Year.
Song of the Month, I think we got once.
I'm kind of want to like put this in the context of not having social media, right? Because you did this this is all happening between 2007, 2010, right?
Yeah, boom years, I guess.
How were you guys getting the word out?
It's a good question. Good question, Sasha. You're like Terry Gross over here. Maybe Joe Rogan. Looking back, I remember that, Facebook, it was just hitting, but we were using MySpace. Like T-Bird and the Breaks definitely had a MySpace page.
Okay, nice.
Initially.
Nice.
And like for a year, and then MySpace like basically died. And Facebook pretty much popped up in its place very quickly, is my memory of it. The Chronicle was a big deal at that point, for sure. Like, whereas I don't feel that to be true as much anymore. Yeah, I mean, like the listings, like if you were going to go out, you were going to look at the Chronicle and like the different clubs all had their little,
Still do.
Yeah, they still do. Totally. Flyers, we definitely like printed flyers a lot and like paid like the Motorblade dude. I don't know if you heard of him. He's like, I don't know if he's still operational, but it was this guy who was like on roller skates
No way.
Yeah, that was the legend, at least. I never actually saw the dude. He probably just drove around in like a Honda, but
You just left flyers in a briefcase with like $200 and just walked away.
yeah, it was something along those lines. Like it was like $100, and you gave this certain size and certain amount, and you got a discount if you printed on the flyer like Motorblade or whatever his thing was. But yeah, you definitely were printing flyers, and we would go out and flyer even like the band, and like taping them to telephone poles, and yeah.
Was there a scene? I remember once you told me that you kind of came up at the time of Gary Clark.
Yeah.
Was there like a group of you guys who were all trying to kind of push funk and Motown and kind of like a revival review and kind of sharing bills and growing the scene together? Or did you feel like you were on your own?
No, we did not feel alone. To me, the build that we always wanted to share with was Brownout.
Sure.
I just remember walking up. She's like, "Yeah, let's go see Brownout," and walking up, and they were playing a James Brown song like impeccably, and I was just like, "What the fuck? Like, who are these dudes?" We did some bills together back in the day, like Antones. I remember doing a show with them, and I guess there weren't a lot of bands exactly like what we were doing, like big horn section and stuff. I mean, Bob Schneider was sort of doing it.
Okay.
But his crowd was like a totally different crowd than ours, But yeah, we discovered the Greyhounds, and it was like similar to Brownout. It was like, holy shit, these guys are the truth. I remember the first time I saw them, we were actually sharing a bill at the Victory Grill. I remember Tim walked out. He's like, "Dude, you need to come inside and check out this band, Greyhounds." It was like, holy shit. And now
Buds, you work with Andrew. He's your partner.
And Andrew is my partner, and Anthony's here all the time, and their last record was done here. We would go through these phases where we would sort of redo the band in some ways. There's a band that size, you're always having these personnel changes. Yeah, it gets so hard interpersonally, It's so hard to pinpoint. You probably need everybody's story and then like a documentarian to get it wrong after. But yeah, I mean, it was musical to some degree. Like, it was just the struggle of how often you have to spend time together, and touring. When I was younger, I was in this party mindset, and I had a strong party body, like I could not sleep for long periods of time and sleep when I did on any surface.
Yeah.
But that starts to like not be as awesome.
No.
The older you get.
I want to go back to this interpersonal thing for a sec, because it's a really interesting point. What happens with bands? I mean, I'm in it too, and I just feel like the passion for music hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The love for playing hasn't changed. The love for this kind of music hasn't changed. In theory, we should only be closer because we've had all these life experiences and bonded. And yet it does feel like as the years go by, it's a struggle to stay in it with your bandmates and keep that locked in connection. Why do you think that is?
History can show us that it doesn't have to do with money or success, because people who have that still have the problems. I mean,
100.
Many of us have a partner, a mate, and a family. So we all know that in itself is challenging enough. Maybe as humans, we only have a certain amount of bandwidth for like that living with somebody vibe. Everyone's annoyed by their partner, whatever, if they don't put the toothpaste cap on or all the little things. You're sort of just amplifying those by however many people are in your band, and living in a situation with very little personal space. You become intimately aware of everything you don't like about somebody, and you feel it from them. And at the same time, like this is your tribe. This is your like gang,
Man, the parallels with like a relationship are crazy. It's the only time outside of a romantic partner that I felt jealousy.
Yeah. Someone plays with another band. It almost feels like they cheated on you.
Why? Where does that come from?
Yeah, I think there must be some innate part of us as humans. Obviously, jealousy is just inbuilt. It must have some evolutionary role, but it feels shitty most of the time, and it doesn't seem productive. But I even feel it, like in the studio business, where it's like, I'll work with somebody, and then they'll go their next project they might do with somebody else, which is ridiculous to be jealous over because that's more common than it is not. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
if you look at people's records,
Yes.
even like
That's normal.
so it's natural, but I still will feel that jealousy, where I'm like, what, shit, I'm not good enough, like.
I'm thinking, I got two ideas. I swear to God, there must be a similar chemical released when like you make love with somebody or you have some experience with them and when you like play music with somebody. There must be something going on in a connection that then you feel like a bond.
It's probably back to some level of tribalism, which, you've got a ringer. Maybe that was a warrior or a really good hunter or somebody who made baskets really well, And if they start making baskets for somebody else, you sort of feel like your tribe is maybe not going to do as well.
And I think you got to it when you said like not being good enough. I think part of what is so precious and delicate about it for a musician is that musicians, they see themselves as a musician.
Right.
Somebody who is an attorney, I think they would describe themselves as like a father or an outdoors lover. Musicians are like, I'm a musician. That's who I am. That's how I see the world. That's how I identify with things. And so then when somebody plays with somebody else or doesn't call you or whatever happens, it feels really personal.
Totally. Because music and this stuff is personal, it's like, it's not like sports, like basketball, where you could,
now you're talking.
You could have these like concrete numbers where you're like, well, he's got great numbers.
Yeah,
like
sure.
music doesn't work by these measurable metrics.
Sure.
So we're really at the whim of the judgment of others or us perceiving it, We're the most sensitive to our peers because we trust them the most, so
yeah.
We'll make something up. If your bass player goes and plays with someone else and you're having trouble getting her for rehearsal because her time is with some other projects, you're like, well, in her excellent opinion of music, she doesn't think I'm that good.
Yes.
Is maybe what we're thinking. And I'm in an engineering sense, I'm like, well, my sound is not as good as others, I guess, and we're critical of ourselves because we don't have anything else to measure off of, and those are the people we trust. And they're not even thinking that we probably at all,
They're definitely not.
They like singing our praises maybe. And
yeah, they're after also being like,
this
band I'm in is great.
Yeah,
they're like, they hate me.
Yeah, totally.
Musicians are so funny. We're just flaming hypocrites. The musicians are all like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. You run a musician, like, what did you do last night? Oh, I played at Cactus Cafe. Oh, cool, man. How was the set? We were vibing. We got into it around the third song. But really, we're all just softies at heart, man. We're all just like, don't want to be hurt, vulnerable, scared of our art, want approval.
Yeah. And, it's like no one wants to read a review if it comes out.
Right.
Because there's the chance that it might be bad.
Right.
But if it's good, we fucking want to read it, like.
Yeah, you want to post it everywhere.
Oh, I feel so good. Like the ego, what's the serotonin or something gets released, and we don't want to read it also because it's like it could ruin us if it speaks something that could possibly be true.
All right, man, I want to turn attention to engineering for a bit.
Okay.
I feel like, Sam, every engineer I know always seems to have a current fascination. It just seems like an engineer thing. It's like a new slap delay. It's a new mic. It's a new kick drum sound. I'm sure you have one, man. What is your current, obsession?
Well, it's called an overstayer. It's a stereo VCA compressor. It's sort of in an SSL bus compressor style, but it has some sort of bells and whistles, including some shelf EQs. And it's just great. I've been putting it on the bus and enjoying it, but it can do crazy things too, pumping drum compressor stuff. Yeah, I feel like there was one other thing that I've been psyched on. So I'm a huge fan of tape delays.
Okay.
So I picked up this Marantz cassette deck that a reporter might carry around. It has a little guitar strap looking thing there. You could,
Yeah.
do your interviews with.
Yeah, of course.
In the 80s.
Yeah, of course.
And but it happens to have 3 heads, which is what you need to be a tape delay. You need the three heads being erase, record, and playback. So the gap between the record and the playback is your delay. And so, but you then adjust the speed of the tape, which changes that time between those two heads. So this thing does it, and people mod them online and put like knobs up here that do wet dry and all this stuff. But I was like, wait, I have a mixing console. I can just do that stuff on the console. So
that's super
whereas
cool.
if I use one of the big machines, it's just sort of like, it's still tape delay, has something about it, but that's real grimy and tapey.
You crushed this question. I knew you would. Every engineer has something.
Yeah, man, and I'm in the market for a new console, which is like, could probably be classified as a mental illness, as is most gear lusting. But it's like once you get your mindset on something, it's like, fuck.
No turning back. What's your dream console?
Neve, SSL, and some of the lower priced ones like the Neotechs. But that's a lot of money, you know?
It sure is.
For something that's not even necessary in the process, you know? You could do it with an interface and a laptop these days, so
crazy. I know a lot of ingredients go into a great session. A lot of things need to go right, from good people to good players to good vibes. Give me your checklist. What are all the ingredients for you to have a great experience in a really productive, happy, fun session?
I think a good song is first. Rehearsing it, whether that happens outside of the studio or if the budget is such that happens in the studio. A song will change as people, if something technical is holding it up and they keep playing it. Like, so trying to be ready to capture it well is important for me. After that, you know, good gear I think is important. A good room and good gear, they're tied together. Being prepared, you just can't underestimate it, you know, especially since studio time is expensive these days. You know, come in with like a list of what you want to do. Doesn't matter if you deviate from it, but if you have a sort of a game plan.
You haven't mentioned the hang.
I think I just discount that because it's like happening and I'm not aware of it. But yeah, totally important. Like, it probably should be more up on the list if I thought about this list more, like I was writing an article or something. I try to be as friendly as possible, you know, like people are nervous sometimes when they come into the studio. And especially people who haven't done a lot of that. So like, I want to be as chill as possible and just talking. If people want to smoke weed in any room, that's totally cool. Whatever they want to do and however they want to do it. If they don't seem comfortable, you know, like vocal take or something, that's usually where people get the most clammed up. It's where we're the most exposed. I want them to know that I respect that, and you have to make the environment right for people and comfortable. Lighting, I'm very aware of lighting and how that's working out. And, you know, people like to invite their friends to the studio and have a hang. We're all thinking like it's the 60s, you know, and it's like you hear all these people in the background in the studio, Sly Stone, Beatles, but it doesn't always work out. Like, those people had huge budgets and maybe got nothing done in a whole day sometimes.
And that was okay.
It was okay. We're under different constraints now, and it's like pretty much every day has to be productive in the studio.
Yeah.
The hang is a delicate balance. Sometimes you got to tell people to go outside. I think all studios need to have a place to hang that's not the cutting room or the control room. Like, there has to be some other places.
I think that's critical. I agree.
Yep. And ideally, a nice outdoor space that's sort of got trees. I think nature's just good for humans.
I'm into that, brother. I'm into that. Do you have a favorite kind of session?
I guess the most exhilarating thing for me is a live band session to tape.
Cool.
There's nothing like it. It's like riding a motorcycle or something. You know, it's like there's this element of danger. If you don't press the right button, you can delete forever something. I think those things in life tend to be good for us, you know?
Yes.
Danger. You don't have the computer on because you're working on tape, so you're just like listening to music and learning the song in your head as opposed to visually with the waveforms. And then you have to do punches on tape, which is when you get into the real, like, don't fuck up mentality. It's like, you know, you have to say, okay, it's like on the and of 4, I need to punch in.
Oh, crazy.
James Stevens taught me this. I mean, watching him was how I learned. Like, you know, he'd be like sitting in his chair, sort of like twitching, and he's like, and you can look at all old tape machines, which they all are old now. Like the transport buttons like have seen some wear, and punching. It's musicians used to walk in the room, pro studio musicians. They walk in the room after they say bar 34, second beat I need to punch, and it's like it's incredibly efficient. Honestly, like when a good band, like maybe 2 people will need to punch in a song, a total of like 3 spots.
Yeah.
And it's done in like no time. Yeah. Whereas like digitally, because you don't really have to fix it then, you don't have to like the patch of the sound is right then, you just like...
I'm going to kind of close with what you said initially, which is I can only imagine in your position, nothing is more exhilarating, exciting than it's 10 a.m. and you're starting a session and the artist walks in and they pick up an acoustic guitar and they just play a great fucking song.
Totally. Yeah, and when you hear a vocalist, hit something, you get the like tingle thing. It's... I've never really thought about this, but you're hearing it for the first time ever.
That's meta.
Like live, but like if that's the one for the record, it's like you were the first one to hear it.
Just curious, what percentage of the time does that happen? What percentage of the songs you work on do you really like?
It's definitely over 50.
Cool.
It's relatively few and far between that I'm just like, oh God, it happens to everybody.
Yeah.
It happens to musicians who play on other people's stuff, and you're just like, oh my God, I'm just doing this for money at this point. I think the way that Andrew and I set up this studio and the way I was working before, we're not like trying to be some big commercial space, which might be better for our bank accounts. I just don't really have a lot of interest in just being a technician. I'm not going to do as good of a job for somebody if I don't like their music.
Yeah. And
there's some level of you learn to see what's good about anything, Try to find what it needs and who it's speaking to and all that.
I think that's a huge part of the job.
Yeah, it is.
You got a great drummer. Let's feature that. Yeah. The singer has a weird but cool voice. Let's get into that. You kind of got to sell yourself on the
Totally.
thing.
Maybe he needs to double it, and then his voice will not, bother me or something. Like if there's...
Yeah.
How can I help them make a better record?
When COVID ends, or even if we could do it safely, I'd love to come to the studio. We could unpack a song or talk about the sounds or kind of do a deep dive on what you got going on there and kind of bring people behind the curtain.
Yeah, man. We don't even have a curtain. It's just an open door.
I meant metaphorically.
I know. I was just being stupidly clever.
All right, Sam Patlove, Buds Recording Services, a beautiful person. Thank you for joining us tonight, man.
Thank you, Sasha. It's been fun.